That this program is financed by the trustees of the Howard Funds, and we're very grateful for their support. So without further ado, Mr. McColgan.
Yes, all right, let's talk about an old, are we all old house people? I'm gonna guess we are advocates. Yes, raise of hands. All right, I'm preaching to the choir. I would expect I'm preaching to the choir. But I never know. And I'll say this, so when I left a corporate career, the story is part memoir, part history, dove headfirst into the world of historic preservation. I was very, very naive back then. I thought that everybody would understand that a big part of what creates that wonderful character and charm of the towns that we live in Massachusetts, in New England, really all over the country or the world, is the historic architecture. And I would think that everywhere, everyone would see it the same way, and that people would all want to save these old buildings. They wouldn't want to just demolish perfectly good old structures. And very quickly, what did I learn? Does everybody want to save old buildings? No! You realize saving everyone is a fight. It's a constant fight to save these things. And I said, how do I get people to see it my way? How can I win some hearts and minds? Because we can regulate, and I'm in favor of that, but sometimes people get a little grumpy when they spend a lot of money on their own property, and the Historic Commission or Historic Society or town comes and tells them what they can or cannot do with their own house. And I understand that. So I said maybe we can develop some more appreciation for these buildings if people know a little more about them. The other thing I know about people is everybody likes a good story. And I had a story of restoring an old building, so I said, I will tell my story, I will write this down, and that culminated in the writing of this book, A House Restored. So the whole goal of this was to get people excited, to create more advocacy for historic preservation. That is why I wrote the book. So I'll just give you an overview of what the story is. I don't want to tell you too much because I'm hoping you will read the book. Has anyone read the book yet already? No? Okay. And then lastly, that'll be good. I won't spoil anything. I'm going to tell you one story from one of the chapters. So, what is the main part of the story? My lovely wife Liz and I, a number of years ago, bought a historic house in Pembroke, not far from here. It was built in 1702. We call it the Loring House. It was built by a man named Thomas Loring back in the 18th century. And I like to say, the woman that lived there before us, she was there for 40 years. She might be the best, absolutely best historic preservationist the world has ever seen. By which I mean what? What? She did nothing to the house. That's okay. We bought an old house. I didn't want to buy an old historic house that had already been gutted and remodeled. I wanted that character, so that's what I was looking for. But when someone owns a 300-year-old house and does almost nothing to it in 40 years, there are going to be some things that have to get done. So, I'm thinking about what is the best way to go about this. And I'm doing my research, my planning, and one night I'm having dinner with my lovely wife Liz, and she springs another idea on me. She says, I've always wanted to buy a big house like this so we can host events and have friends and family come over. And she says, I've got an idea. Why don't we host next year's Thanksgiving at our house? And this is going to give me 18 months to get this house, this untouched house, in respectable order before a couple dozen guests are going to be showing up on my doorstep, to which I say what to this idea? Can I do this? Of course I can do this. 18 months, it's all the time in the world. What could possibly go wrong? So, who lives in an old house? I should ask that. Where are my old, anyone? Handful? Handful? Okay. Sometimes it's nicer to sort of watch it from the sidelines. I get that. Even if you don't live in an old house. Any house. When you get into projects on a house, you've got different ways to go about this. You can call a contractor. Are they going to show up? What contractor do you call? You can do work yourself. You can go online. You can watch videos. You can be a DIYer. All that. So there's lots of different ways to go about this. Now, my whole goal with this restoration is to restore this house without losing that wonderful, untouched character that has come down through the ages. And I'm thinking about what is the best way to do this. I am reading a book. Does anyone read anything from Nathaniel Philbrick, author out of Nantucket? Yes, had a chance to meet Nat, wonderful guy. I'll be speaking out there in a couple months. Nat, before his fame Within the Heart of the Sea, and he has some of the other big books that he wrote, his first book was a little sleepy history called Away Offshore about the people on Nantucket. And I was thumbing through this book, and in it I found an account of a builder from the 18th century. His name was Richard Macy. There's a whole detailed chapter on this guy. And when Richard Macy wants to build a house, he does everything himself. If he needs stones for the foundation, what does he do? He goes down to the common ground and he collects them. If he needs wood for the frame, what does he do? He gets an axe, he chops the trees down, he hews these logs square. If he needs plaster or mortar, what does he do? He collects shells off the beach, he fires them, converts it into a putty, uses that for plaster and mortar. If he needs hardware, what does he do? He rocks it with his own hands. He is a blacksmith. Thus, Richard Macy does everything himself, the quintessential jack of all trades, and of course, all of this in an age, the pre-industrial age, before we have electricity. I think that's pretty impressive. Would you agree? Yes. But here's the problem. When you read books like this, the problem with books is they can give us bad ideas. So I am thinking about the best way to go about restoring this house without losing the character, and I read this account of Richard Macy, and what do I come to the conclusion that I'll do? I'm going to do it all myself, and I'm going to restore this house using traditional tools and techniques. Is this a good idea? No. No! Am I going to do it anyway? Yes, I am. All right. That's the story. I'm going to tell you one story from one of the chapters. Again, I don't want to give too much away. It's a longer story, maybe 10, 15 minutes here, so bear with me. All right, where do I begin? I start, so most of the old part of the house is untouched. There's an L off the back built in the early 1800s. And as you can see over the years, lots of stuff has been piled on, layers of flooring, that brown veneer paneling that we love to hammer up on all the walls of these houses. I know, head shake, I know, we love that stuff. So it's covered in this paneling, all this stuff. And I'm looking at this room and I'm thinking, this is going to be the easy place to start because this is going to be cosmetic. I'll just tear all that stuff out and restore this thing back to an earlier age, and isn't that just going to be wonderful? And then I can get to some of the bigger projects. Sounds like a pretty good plan. So, to the lady here shaking her head at that panel, have you ever torn this paneling out before? Yeah. All right. So, for anyone, if you haven't, what you do, it's veneer, it's delicate, it'll make a big mess, it'll break up all these pieces. So you want to find the seam. You take the feathered end of a crowbar. So I get a big 3-foot long crowbar, I take that feathered end and I wedge it into the seam of one of these panels, and you gently start working it up and down, and this stuff is cracking and popping, and the dust is kicking up in the air, and the little nails are wiggling, and this is where I get excited, because the most exciting part of a project is the beginning, because there are all these wonderful possibilities. What am I going to find under this paneling? Maybe there'll be some early horsehair plaster, maybe there'll be some old wallpaper for some Victorian era, well preserved, maybe some old New Englander took a bunch of gold coins and put them in a little sack and buried them in the wall and forgot to tell his kids, and he died, and it's still there, and I'm going to find treasure and be rich. and these are the things I'm thinking about, and I'm prying, and finally this piece of paneling pops off in one clean sheet, and I take it and I move it aside, and do I find any of that under this paneling? No! What do I find? I find nothing. I find a hole in the frame where a frame should be. Now, this is, of course, a little further along in the process as I had to open more of this space up. But initially, I am looking at the corner. This is where 4 beams come together. You have a corner post, these gun stock posts. We see that with all that material on the top. You've got a beam that runs along the eave end. It is called the wall plate. You have a beam that runs along the gable end, ties the 2 sides of the room together. What do we call that? Ties the 2 sides of the room together. Tie beam. They call it a tie beam. And you have a rafter, a beam that runs down from the ridge, and all of this fits together. Architectural historians call this the English tying joint, and it's all fit with this lovely mortise and tenon joinery and hammered together with pegs. A very, very durable way to build a frame out of wood. Now, that's all fine and dandy, but when you are staring in the corner where your English tying joint should be, and there is no English tying joint to be seen, that is a concerning moment. I throw my crowbar down, it clangs on the ground, I run out to the barn, I rummage around through some scrap wood, I come in with 4x4s, 1 under each arm and a saw, I cut these things down, I'm propping this stuff up, I'm wondering, how is this very thing not falling down on my head? And the answer to that is, see these vertical sheathing boards? They are a lot more structural than one would imagine. Whole corner of your frame can be gone. Sheathing boards are holding it up just fine, but that is not a good long-term solution. So this is where I'm thinking, knowing that this is some of the most elaborate joinery in a frame of this period, maybe being this Richard Macy character and following in his footsteps is a little more than I can handle, and maybe it is time that I abandon this plan and go find some help. So, if you are looking for someone that knows, any timber framers in the audience? Anyone timber framing? No, exactly. They occasionally get 1 or 2, but generally there's not a whole society full of timber framers. So when you need to find a timber framer, where do you go? Pennsylvania. Some people, I hear that. Some people are Maine, Vermont, New Hampshire. This old house, would you say this old house? This old house. Huh? Where? Where else? Nova Scotia. Okay. So, what's that? There, HGTV, exactly. So I need to find a TV personality or drive somewhere really far away. These are not practical things on my time and budget. Here's what I remember. I remember it as a little kid, when I was in grade school, I was taken on a field trip down to Plymouth, Massachusetts, to a little living history museum that we know as what? Plymouth Plantation. And I remembered as a kid seeing these 2 rows of these beautifully reproduced Pilgrim-era houses, and I am thinking, I bet somebody down there will know where I should start. So, I get in my car. Has everyone been to Plymouth Plantation before? Yes? Yeah. I get in my car. I drive down to Plymouth Plantation. I pay for my ticket. I go out onto the grounds. And just as I remembered as a kid, there's that beautiful hill that slopes down to the water's edge, and on each side of it are these 2 rows of these reproduced Pilgrim houses, and I am thinking, this is great, somebody here will be able to help me. So I find someone that is working out there on the grounds, and they're easy to spot. Why are they easy to spot? Because they are dressed up in costume. They are costume interpreters. They are interpreting a character of one of the passengers on the Mayflower. And I'm thinking, this is going to be great. So I go up and I try to have a conversation with the first interpreter that I see. And what I learned is when it comes to these characters they interpret, they take this very, very seriously, and they are told, I am assuming, very strictly not to break character. So I cannot get one of these people to have a modern day conversation with me. So I find another, same thing. I find another. I'm thinking someone will talk to me about timber framing, and I'm not getting anything that's useful. I'm getting William Bradford and Edward Winslow and Susanna White and all this backstory that will not help me in my quest. And I'm getting a little frustrated. So finally, one of these interpreters sees me from across the yard. She must have been watching me kind of bounce around like a ping pong ball. She's got the whole thing on, the linen, the big felt hat, the linen apron, the whole thing. And she gives me a wave from across the yard. Psh, you. Me? Yeah, you. Come here. So I follow her over. And she has tucked herself behind one of these reproduced buildings. She's tucked behind it. We're on the side of the thing, not out in view of everybody. And she leans in and she starts looking over her shoulder. And I'm realizing she doesn't want to see, she doesn't want anyone to see that she's going to talk to me like a regular person. I don't know what they do to these people if they break character, but this is serious business over there. So here we are. She's looking over her shoulder and she starts talking in a whisper. And I answer back in a whisper. Why am I talking in a whisper? I've got nothing to hide. And she says in a whisper, she says, the person you need to talk to is a man named Michael Burry. He knows everything. He built most of these houses. That's who you have to talk to. And I'm thinking, this is great. Where is Michael Burry? And she says, he doesn't work here anymore. But that's okay. She's got a phone number. She gives me a phone number. I call Michael. Has anyone run into Michael Burry before? He's been timber framing on the South Shore for a long time. She gives me a number. I call Michael. He answers the phone. I've got a picture. So Michael, a little bit about Michael Burry. So Michael had left Plymouth Plantation. He is now the preservation carpentry instructor at a little school in Boston that we know as the North Bennett Street School. It is the oldest trade school in the country. Michael has been in the Boston Globe more recently because he was one of only a handful of American carpenters that were selected to go over to France and to be part of the Notre Dame restoration. Yes, one of the most impressive carpenters I have met. So I track this guy down. He's working on a project in Marshfield at the time. I tell him about what I'm doing. He shows me some of his work, and I learn that every summer Michael likes to take on an apprentice in between the school year. He had not found one yet, and I'm thinking, I've got just the person for you. This is the most opportune moment for me to leave my nice, comfortable corporate career and trade that to be the apprentice of Michael Burry, the eccentric timber framing preservation carpentry instructor. Financially, is this a good idea? No, it's not a good idea. Am I going to do it anyway? Yeah. Of course I am. So, I spend a summer with Michael Burry. And here's a little secret. Has anyone worked with any of these preservation folks before? Anyone? With your old properties? No? Okay. A little secret. This has to stay between us. The camera's filming. I don't know who's going to see this. But I don't care. I'm going to let you know a little secret. All these old house people, get into this stuff. They're all, if you've never met one, they're all, don't tell anybody that I told you this, but they're all Hoarders. They're all hoarders because what happens is when one of these old buildings is going to get demolished and we can't save it, they do the next best thing. It's like the bat signal goes out and all the preservation contractors hop in their beat up old trucks and they drive down to this thing with crowbars, and before it's completely demolished and thrown in a dumpster, what do? They pick and they pry and they pull out windows and doors and old hardware and siding and they fill up the backs of their trucks. And where do they take this stuff? To some kind of museum that is climate control where it's stored and displayed? No, they don't take it there. They bring it home and they start filling up the attic. And when the attic is full, then where does it go? Down into the basement. And when the basement is full, then where does it go? Out into the garage. And when the garage is full, where does this stuff go? Out on the front lawn is where it goes. And if you drive by Michael's house, I love Michael, but you will see piles of architectural salvage taller than me. And when you are the apprentice for Michael Burry, every now and again, the job comes along where you need to get that thing that is down here in the pile that is up to here. And whose job is it to move all that stuff? This guy. This is where you start questioning your life choices. But it is all worth it to learn from a master of his craft how to chisel out a mortise, how to cut a tenon, how to sharpen or tune up an old hand plane. These are the tricks of the trade that someone like that has acquired over years, and it is a wonderful thing to see that man in action and to learn from him. So I dutifully spend my summer doing all the grunt work in labor to learn a little bit about this trade. At the end of the summer, though, I've got to get back to the Loring house. I've got to get back to fixing this corner of this frame, and I feel that I have got enough knowledge now to tackle it. So onward I go. Now, there is one thing I was set on, because always in the back of my mind is the little voice of Richard Macy just pecking away. And when Richard Macy needed wood for a frame, what did he do? Chopped it down with his own hands. And if you go to any of these really old house museums, you see these big exposed beams of these timber frames, if you look really close, when the light comes through the window and hits the beams just right, you will see these little scalloped indentations, hundreds and hundreds of them. They used a double beveled hewing axe, and those are the marks left from the hand hewing. And for someone that appreciates all the work that went into just squaring up one beam, it's a glorious thing. And I can't, trying to be like Richard Macy, in good conscience, just have my beam sawn at a regular sawmill. That would be sacrilegious. I must hand hew it myself. Did I think about felling the trees from scratch for a time? Yes, I did. Did I do that? No. There is some rational thinking left in this brain of mine. So here's what I did. There's a little secret. You can have a sawmill cut your beam, and you just have them cut it a little wider than you need, leave some extra material, and you can just hew off the ends, and it'll match the nice early hewn timber that is in the structure. So, has anyone ever seen a timber being hewn before? These history museums? Yes, a couple of people. All right, I hadn't done this with Michael. I'd seen it, watched some videos online, but mostly what I had was this illustration in an Eric Sloan book. If anyone has ever read Eric Sloan's stuff back in the 50s, I think he published a lot of this stuff. So, hewing a beam is a two-part process. First, you cut a series of notches in the log, and then you change out your felling axe. You swap it out for a big, fat, broad axe, and then you hack in between those notches, and these big sections of material just pop off. And when you get one side square, you flip it over, you work the next side, and you work your way all the way around. Looks pretty straightforward, right? That's what I thought. Pretty straightforward. But what do you notice about what the individual in the top part of this illustration is doing? He is standing on the log. Yes, correct. He is standing on the log. And once he is standing up on that log, then what is he doing? Swinging a razor-sharp axe. Correct, swinging a razor-sharp axe. And where is he swinging that razor-sharp axe? In between his feet. Is this a good idea? No! Am I going to do it anyway? Yeah. Of course. So, I get my log, and I climb up. I climb up on my log, and here I am in my backyard, and I unfurl this razor-sharp felling axe, and I'm standing on this log, and I'm looking down, and I'm realizing I'm about to start swinging this in between my feet. And this is another one of those moments where you question your life choices. And I'm thinking, what happens if I swing and miss and I lop off a toe? I'm going to have to climb down off this log. I'm going to have to crawl around on all fours through the grass, hoping I can find said toe, hoping that it can be stitched back on in time. But you can't let that kind of negative thinking get in the way. You must push it aside. So finally, I commit and I raise my axe up like a medieval executioner about to chop off a head, and I bring it down with all my might. And does it cut cleanly into the wood? No, it skips off the log. It almost cuts off my toe. But don't worry, it didn't. They're all intact. So I try it again and again and again, and lo and behold, it's like anything, repetition, practice, practice, practice. I get the technique down, and after a weekend or so, there is my hand-hewn beam. I cut the joinery for my English tying joint. I prop this thing up in place, and I cut these little bits of patchwork in there. You don't have to completely get rid of it. It's like dental work. You cut out the rotted stuff and just patch it in with new material. You use what is called scarf joints. So I fit these patch pieces in, and lo and behold, in short time, I have restored my English tying joint. Yes, that's where you applaud, people. I have restored my English tying joint. Thank you. Thank you. See the little scallops? You see, isn't that just a beautiful thing? You would never even know that that was repaired. So, where are my project people? Where are my DIYers? Who does projects? You got to be a handful. Raise them high, project people, project. You don't have to be a project person. Anything you do in life, anything that is challenging. There comes that moment when you finish a project, and it's a glorious feeling. Oh, I got this thing done. You feel like the king of the world. Here I am. I've restored my English tying joint. I am basking in the glow of self-accomplishment. I go into the bathroom to clean myself up. I'm covered in sawdust head to toe, stuff all over my face, clothes everywhere. And I'm washing my hands up. I got stuff on my face. I'm getting it off my face, and I'm leaning in close to the mirror to make sure that I have got all of this stuff off my face. And you will notice, if you ever stare in a mirror and lean closer to it, what happens? The reflection in the mirror behind you gets bigger. You see more of the room the closer you get to it. So as I am leaning in, wiping off the dirt from my face, I see behind me a big black spot on the ceiling, a big black spot that I don't remember seeing before in this house. And I am thinking, what the hell is that? That, ladies and gentlemen, is the end of chapter 1. So, this is how our story is structured. It is not about Pembroke. You don't live in Pembroke, so you don't care about Pembroke. It is not about Thomas Loring. You don't know who Thomas Loring is. You don't care about Thomas Loring, but you are old house people. This is a story where the old house is the main character. It is about the 6 materials used to build a house of this period: wood, lime, iron, stone, brick, and glass. And every chapter is structured the same way. I get into a project revolving around one of these materials. I think I can do it all myself using pre-industrial tools and technologies. I quickly get myself in a mess. I have to run off and find help, find a modern-day traditional builder. They're all eccentric characters. They make for great people to put in a book. I come back and I restore said material. And just when things are looking good, something else goes wrong that leads you into the next chapter, a cliffhanger in every chapter, and all of this with the clock ticking. There's an 18-month timeline before people will be showing up at my doorstep. Will I get this done in time for Thanksgiving? I can't tell you that. You have to read the book. So, I will close with this, and then I will take questions if you have them. I'm going to come full circle. I left a corporate career, so I'm going to put my business hat back on. We'll come full circle, tie a little bow around this little talk. I opened this presentation by telling you first why I wrote this book. What was my reason? Why did I write this book? Have we forgotten already? This was only 25 minutes ago. To create more, we've already forgotten. Have I put you to sleep already? I hope not. To create more advocacy for historic preservation. Do we all want to see more of these buildings saved and fewer of them demolished? Yes. I wrote this to create more advocacy for historic preservation. Intentionally, I did not write it about Pembroke because I wanted it to be a story that is general to anyone that's interested in old houses, so it would have more potential and more interest for a larger audience to read. And thus far, that has been a success. We have been featured in the New York Times. We have been in the Boston Globe. I was on WGBH. This book got nominated for a New England Book Award. And we have sold 5,000 copies or so, not too shabby for a first book. But I cannot do this alone. I will travel anywhere people will listen to me, but I cannot do it alone. I need some help, people. And what is the best way that you can help me? Buy the book. Thank you. Yes, now we're following. Buy the book. Listen. This is my sales pitch. Listen. You don't have to like the book. If you buy it and you read it and you don't like it, here's what I want you to do. Take the book, open it up, turn it to any page your little heart desires, and tear that page out and crumple it up in a little ball and stuff it in that gap in your drafty windows. Next season, when winter rolls around, tear that page out, crumple it up, set it down on the hearth, the old historic hearth, get the fire started. It's great. Wobbly table leg, stuff it under there. It works great to prop up a wobbly table. I don't care what you do with it if you don't like it, but if you do like it, here's what I need you to do. Tell somebody about it. Give it to someone as a gift. Get people excited about this. If people are not excited about historic preservation, we're going to continue to lose these fights, and more buildings are just going to be demolished. In Pembroke alone, since I joined the board of my historic society, I have seen 3 18th century buildings demolished with nothing to do to stop it other than put a 1-year moratorium on these properties. And what happens is whoever buys it that wants to knock it down, they wait a year and then they knock it down anyway. And all we've done by putting the 1-year moratorium on them is piss them off, because now they've had to delay their new construction project. We don't want to do that. We want to get people to understand why saving these things matter. Appreciation creates awareness. The more people that get excited about this topic, the fewer of these battles we have to have when the next one is on the chopping block. The more people that are excited about this stuff, the easier it is to get people's attention when we need to raise money to save them. The more money we raise, the more properties we save. With that, the book is A House Restored. My name is Lee McColgan. Thank you for being a wonderful audience, and I will stick around if anyone has any questions. Yes, thank you. Were there any young children in the house? Yeah, we feed them lead paint. It's good for the bone. Here, go chew on that. It'll be great. No, that's horrible. No, my wife and I do not have kids. No kids.
That beam you replaced there, what was the type of wood? Was it oak? What did you use for?
Yeah, okay, so a little bit of philosophy on historic preservation projects. So typically, most of us in that field subscribe to an in-kind approach. So whatever is there before, we just do what was done before, and then you don't have to overthink any of this thing. Oh, well, that's what was there. So it was white oak and eastern white pine. Sills and posts were white oak, and then everything above that, they used white pine. So I use those species. I looked into maybe initially when I got into this, I thought, oh, maybe I can find some old salvage beams and just replace those. And not that it's a huge consideration, but academically, the philosophy for a lot of people that I work with, they like to use new wood. So if someone, years down the road, someone wants to do dendrochronology or analyze the kind of history of this house, they'll know that, oh, these repairs were done in 2024 or whenever. So new wood is not frowned upon. So I use new white oak and new white
Or
pine.
you're chopping it, like, that's all, you gotta have muscle like you wouldn't believe.
Do you have any pictures of your finished home?
Not in this presentation. Yeah, sorry. There are. Where can you find stuff? There.
We're gonna be there Thanksgiving.
So, admittedly, I'll say this. It's not really a great. You watch these shows, This Old House and House with History, and In with the Old, a bunch of these programs. And everybody loves the good before after. This house isn't the best for that, because a lot of what I'm doing is I'm trying to do restoration work without showing that I've really done anything. So you walk through and there are hours and hours of work in certain places that you would just walk by and probably wouldn't even notice. But also the other part of that is because I took this crazy approach of doing most of it myself and using this traditional methods. Most of the work I've done since we've owned it, it's major structural stuff, and I haven't even gotten to that cosmetic stuff that really makes it before after
How many
pop.
years have you been working on
8 now, yeah, give or take.
it? What is your attic like? Is it just the beams, or are there old boards over it?
So again, the other thing I've found. So residential houses typically over the years people are going to make changes and stuff is going to go. The museum houses tend to freeze in time. This is that weird combination of a house that, even though it's been residentially zoned and owned, it did largely stop in time. A lot of the original materials there. And I don't find that that often. I've been in a lot of the historic residential houses in Pembroke, and mostly you get to the point where everything's been gutted, it's just the frame. Maybe frame and some plaster, maybe the fireplace, but usually windows, doors, all that stuff have long been replaced. So this attic, it's called a primary rafter and purlin system. So you've got big rafters and then these kind of thin purlins that run in between each bent of the frame. They sag a little bit, and yes, big wide pine planks. Yeah. So the attic, you go up to the attic and it is like stepping back into the 18th century. 100%. Question.
So are you living in it now? And if so, how long, when the work started, was it before you could inhabit the place?
Yeah, so, okay. I dramatize a little bit. So Lydia didn't do anything to the house, but it was a livable house. It does have, someone over the years, I don't know if it was her or the couple before her, it's got, someone put ductwork in, it's got forced hot air, it's got plumbing, it's got all that stuff. Electrical is there, but shaky. There's actually, while this is mostly the traditional side of it, the last chapter is on electrical because we had a little electrical nightmare right before the, like day or two before people are showing up. So yeah, we've lived in it and we've done the work while we're in it, and then the question usually comes after that is, are you still married? And the answer to that is yes. My wife has been very tolerant, although admittedly she's about had enough of the approach of me doing everything and doing it in a traditional way. She's at a point of, can we just hire someone and have them come? I don't care how they do it. Bring them in, have them be done in a week, and be gone.
Does your house have a central fireplace, or you have on both ends?
Yeah, so it's got 2 end chimneys. So the house was, it originally was a single story with an end chimney, and then latter part of the 18th century, they did an addition and then raised it up. And then in the Georgian style, end chimneys and central passageway was fashionable, as opposed to the really early colonial houses where the fireplace is in the middle, which of course is more efficient for heating. But yes, it's very much architecturally in a Georgian style, so end chimneys, central fireplace, or central passageway.
Do you know about the house across the street?
No, tell me. Who said?
About Marlene House?
No.
Just down the street? Those are 2 old houses.
Did they put them together? Or you're saying
No,
they're just 2 separate?
properties.
Okay, I'll have to check it out.
But hers is more than this one, and in Bridgewater on Bedford, on Summer Street, where CVS is.
Yeah.
2 1820 houses came down.
Now, can you go in them, or are they just residential houses now?
They cleaned them out before they.
Yeah, they demolished them.
Oh, they're gone.
God, yeah. To put a CVS.
There you go. There you go.
How many people did you host for Thanksgiving?
We had 22 dozen or so. Yeah. So I had a fear. One of the major structural things that I still have yet to do, which is lower on the list, is on the first level. There is so you hear the term a summer beam, and typically people use these. There's slightly different definitions to some of these terms based on who you talk to, but generally most people accept any large beam that has floor joists tenon into it. So you go in these old houses, you see the big beam in the middle, and all the floor joists connect to it. That typically is known as a summer beam. So the summer beam on the first floor, where the kitchen, where the dining room table and all that is in pretty rough shape and is also sagged over the years. So we've got this table, the dining room table is set up where if you sit on the ends of it, you're at perfect height to the table. If you sit in the middle, you're down here. It's like, remember those commercials where the kid would sit on the 9X Yellow Pages? I know that's, nobody. It's like you got to put the 9X Yellow Pages on the chair. So we had all these old chairs, and before everyone came over, I'm looking to see if any chairs were taller than the other one. There's slight variations of height, so I can put the tallest chairs in the middle part of the table. But I had all these supports under this thing, and I still have yet to get to repairing that beam. But my big fear was having that many people in this house. They were gonna, someone's gonna fall through the whole floor is gonna cave in. It didn't. They're fine.
What's the square footage?
It's pretty big. It's about 3,000, but that's because picture a small 2-room, hall and parlor, and then addition on top of that. So big Georgian colonial with 2 stories, and then an L off the back in the 1800s, and that became the kitchen. And then someone in the 1950s or 60s put a 20th century addition, just utility space off the back of that. So it's like a lot of these things. It's all pieced together.
You got the hitching posts outside and people...
Tie up the horses, yeah. Anything else? Yeah.
How about the roof? I would think that the first thing you want to make sure is that it's not leaking, it's solid.
Okay. So
If you restore it, what do you restore it with?
Okay, so the roof, it's relatively new asphalt shingles. I think the family did do well. Lydia didn't do anything to the house. The family, when they realized they had to sell it, there was a little bit of, put the lipstick on the pig, as the expression goes. So at some point in recent history, they'd put a new asphalt roof on it. So I've not touched that. Although weirdly, certain rains, water comes in certain places, and I still have, I've been up there, I poked around. I don't know if the roofers had, when they were putting supports up, just put holes in to, put a little platform down and then didn't seal those or what.
But when you restore it, with what?
So ideally, I would use cedar. But the other thing is cedar is quite pricey. So the reality of that one is most likely if we get to that, I'm probably just going to do asphalt again. It kills me inside, but a new cedar roof is. If I was still in the corporate world, no problem. But it's been 8 years I've been out of that doing this stuff, so I'm not financially not the man I once was.
Does it have to deal with asbestos or anything like that?
We were lucky with this house. No asbestos in this one, which the big issue, and that stuff. If anyone's gotten into that, is you get asbestos floor tiles, you get asbestos roofing tiles, you get asbestos siding, but the worst one is the insulation, the duct that they put on the old pipes. And I go into a lot of houses and see that, and it's like, oh, I'm not going near that thing, because you just touch that stuff and it just goes right up in the air. So the asbestos insulation around the pipes is the worst, but we were very lucky. We didn't have any of that. Lead paint, that's a whole different, we just have, I had to get my lead renovator supervisor's license when I got into this field. So you go do a weekend program, and they'll tell you, if you go in a house before 1978, just assume their hard line is anything before 78. You don't even have to swab it or test it. Just assume it's full of lead paint. So we know this thing's got lots of lead paint in it. Again, just don't let the kids eat it. It'll be okay.
Did you have much horsehair plaster?
So surprisingly, a remarkable amount of that has survived, and that's rare because a lot of people they don't even think about that. And admittedly, that's the other thing about a little tangent here. The philosophy why I wrote this book this way and kind of the philosophy. When I got into this, I was fascinated with woodworking and framing, and early on I was like, and I didn't care so much about old windows and plaster. I just didn't think that much about that stuff because I didn't know. And then the longer I'm in that field, the more I work with people, the more I learn, the more I read books about this stuff. That kind of understanding or knowledge creates an appreciation for something. The more you know about it, the more you appreciate. If you don't know anything about it, old plaster, I don't care, get rid of it. Then you get into this trade and you work with people that use that stuff, and you kind of see that there is advantages to lath and plaster. It's very, very durable. Traditional lime is naturally antifungal as opposed to gypsum-based plaster boards. There are some advantages to using that stuff. Not that I'm advocating everyone goes back to doing it that way. I understand why we just zip up 4x8 sheets and skim the joints and move on with our life. But I just went down this rabbit hole, and the more I would learn about each one of these different materials, the more I would develop this appreciation. And it was kind of fun because my adventure with all this, I actually started poking around historic house museums before we bought this. So I already had the bug. But I would go in as a woodworker, I'd just study all the woodwork. And, look at the little scallops in the beam and all that. And I wouldn't think about the plaster or the windows or any of that stuff. And then I'd learn about that, and I could go back to the same places with a new, fresh perspective, and then I would study the plaster work. And you get to a point where now I can spend hours on these things because I see all the little details, and I appreciate it. And now I'm at the unhealthy point of you can't just throw this stuff in the dumpster. So now I'm the guy that drives down with a crowbar. Windows on the side of the road, the old wavy glass, I gotta take that. You can't get that wavy glass anymore. It adds something, take that. My wife wants to kill me. So I have become that person, but I have that appreciation. But if you don't understand this, I understand why it's just the old falling apart eyesore, and some people demolish it. If you develop that appreciation, you see it differently. So that's the reason I wrote the book this way.
Did you come across any old wallpaper?
So I was hoping for more. I haven't actually torn into too many walls, so there could be some other stuff in there. Who knows? But there's one really, really old. It's my guess is it's Victorian era. There's a closet within a closet, and all these nooks and crannies. You get lost in these places. They're like a maze. So there's one closet. You open up the closet, and the back of the closet, there's another teeny little door, and you open that up, and there's a little cubby behind that. It's just a closet within a closet, because it's around where the chimney bay is, so they just had all this weird extra space and weird angles, so they just have this little teeny closet. And I opened that up, and in the very back of that, there's a section of old wallpaper. Not that space was wallpapered, but somebody had used some old wood that had really early wallpaper on the one side of it, and they hammered that up when they did some additions in the Victorian era. So it's just there, and that's pretty cool. But it's literally just one teeny little sheet, and of course it's green. And then I watched a documentary on things that were toxic back in the Victorian era, and you realize that green paint, they used to use arsenic for that. And then it's like, oh, great, arsenic. I can't get rid of that. The arsenic might be killing me, but no. I'm sure I'll be fine. Yeah, I don't think that's actually a real threat, but yeah.
Was there a barn on the site as
well? Okay, so it's a horse property. So the woman that Lydia Hale, she's not with us anymore, but who owned it before us, who, to her credit, she was very careful about not making changes to this thing. For those of us that appreciate that, she loved pygmy goats. She was a goat person, and she apparently, at one point, was I didn't know this organization existed, but everyone's got their thing. She was the president of the National Pygmy Goat Association. Didn't know there was a National Pygmy Goat Association, but there is. You can now go find that. She was the president. So she had built sadly, the original barn, what I understand, it was in pretty bad shape, and they did just demolish it. And she put up something in the 80s, which was really speaks to my fascination with building, because the thing's just slapped together with 2x4s. It really is shoddily built. That's what draws me to this. I'm just that person that, you buy the thing at the store, it's some cheap manufactured thing made in China, and it breaks, 2 months later, and you go buy it. That frustrates me. I'm really fast. I want things that are built really well, and that philosophy has kind of extended to how houses are built. And I started looking at these things. It's like, wow, that's really, you timber frame out of oak. I mean, that thing's going to last. It doesn't burn down or rot for hundreds and hundreds of years. And then you see some of the stuff we build in the 80s, 90s. It's like, oh, goodness, that's going to be garbage. Now, it's not always practical, it's a little more of ideological thinking, but, so that barn is there, but it's funny, so my wife is a horse person, we did have a couple horses on the property for a bit, but we had to modify because all the stalls were really tiny because they were for goats. Yeah, they were for pygmy goats, so we had to open that up, but yeah.
How big is the entire property, like 2 acres?
13 acres.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. So the only reason I can swing that, being out of the corporate world, is so Pembroke there's some trails and it abuts townland, and there's some trails behind there. Pembroke's town law has a statute, 61B, that basically states if you decide you're not going to develop it and accept that people can use the trails and walk around back there, we only get taxed on 1 acre as opposed to all 13. So, and if you want to develop and make changes, it's like a five years of back taxes will come down on you. So there's an incentive to not overdevelop, which is kind of nice. So yeah, no intention of developing that. And even if we did, you would have a big tax bill coming your way.
You must have gone through a lot of permits in the town.
So this is the other nice thing about when you're doing in-kind work. Typically, the building inspectors don't want to bother too. If you're taking out windows and you're just going to restore them and put them back in, they don't really want to bother with that stuff. The issue that I had is actually, which isn't part of this story, but work that I did after this time period that the book focuses on, the 20th century addition, the utility space in the back. We did modernize that. And so that was changing the floor plan. So I had demo permits and I had to go get all the approval for that stuff. It wasn't just in-kind stuff. And of course that, all the code kicks in. And the big issue I had with that was, well, you have to hardwire smoke detectors now and with modern day building code. So I had no problem with that. The issue is that in theory triggered the code to kick in for all of the house, not just that room. So I was told originally, well, if you're going to change that, you're going to have to hardwire these smoke detectors, and oh, by the way, you're going to have to hardwire all the smoke detectors, which would mean having to run snake Romex through the walls or rip stuff out, or just a whole nightmare of a project I don't want to get into. And I was very, very lucky. I decided to go get approval with the fire chief. He was lenient and said, I'm going to sign off on this. We're going to grandfather the old part of the house. So just hardwire your new smoke detectors and you can just leave the battery-powered stuff there. So that was because if that had to happen, that would have been a problem. But so other than that, I haven't had too many issues with building code stuff. Yeah.
Does your house have a historical designation?
No. So that's the other problem with residential. Back to the one-year moratorium. You can buy a house. So I just read an article in the newspaper that the Audubon Society was gifted some land a long time ago. This was in Natick. Anyone catch this in the Globe? And there was a 17th century house sitting on a property that the Audubon Society owned, and they just demolished it. When we get into 1600s, for people that appreciate this, those are getting more and more rare. There's really no way to stop it. So there's not no way. So typically, if you really want to save a house, and if you look at that as kind of a legacy thing, I care so much about this. When I die, I want to ensure that this thing is around, that someone's not going to just demolish it. If that floats your boat and the stewardship is your thing, you can put a historic easement on a house. So there's a nonprofit called Historic New England, if anyone is familiar with them. It used to be SPNEA. I forget the acronym, but Society of Preservation of Antiquity. Yeah, New England Antiquities. Yeah, so SPNEA is now Historic New England. There are organizations like that where essentially you can set up an easement on your property. What you're doing is, and there's reasons people don't do it, you're giving the rights of what can be done to your house to another entity. So you're signing over the rights to your own house to a nonprofit, which doesn't sit well with a lot of people. But if you die or if you sell it, the next homeowner, if they want to gut the thing, they have to get everything approved by SPNEA, and SPNEA will come out, or Historic New England, and they'll come out every year and do walkthroughs and do evaluations, and they take pictures of everything, and they catalog it and all that. That's the only real way to ensure that someone's not just going to buy it and demolish the thing. No, I have not done that on this house. I've thought about it. One, there's giving up that control, even though I'm approaching projects in a way that they would be advocates for. There's just something kind of unsettling of just giving that away. The bigger issue is it costs $50,000. So to set up the easement with Historic New England, and it takes a while for them to set it up, because they want to make sure there's a little money set aside so they can pay for people to come there every year, in theory, for perpetuity. So that's a cost to them to come down and do these inspections, and so they want to have a little bit of money set aside to pay for that. So spending 50 grand, giving up the control of what I can do to my house to another organization for all those reasons, it's like, here I am, Mr. Preservation Advocate. I should be the first one to have an easement on my house, and I don't. So I don't know.
That kind of leads me into the question I had about if you're noticing the trend of flipping houses is really, really hurting this, because I know even in my area,
Yeah.
in the last like 7 houses in my region that have not sold to owners. A flipper comes in, just, guts everything,
Yep.
makes it kind of generic,
Yep.
and then it's back on the market in 2.5 months.
Yep.
So it's not done well, obviously, but also some of these houses are older homes, and so you're losing all of that character and architecture.
Well, the other negative to an easement is that deters. Now you're going to get a buyer like me if that's on there, but the developers aren't going to buy a property with an easement on it, because then they can't do anything. So that's also the only way to stop it. But then you put an easement on your house, and if you do want to sell it, now you've got a limited number of buyers, and you're probably going to, you're certainly not getting the highest bidder, but highest bidder subjects you to someone that might just gut it or just knock the thing down. So for those of us that really care about this, it's sticky. It's a complicated thing, and there's not a real clear-cut answer. Other than the other thing, this is where I get torn. I've had a love-hate relationship. Maybe you can tell with this property. It's the character of the story, but it's more the antagonist. I'm the protagonist in this story. So there are times when I love this, and there are times when I think, what the heck am I doing with my life? I should sell this thing. Or my wife certainly has had that thought. She's had that thought more than I do. But then I don't. I'm just attached to it. So there's this kind of philosophical part of, we get attached to our houses because sentimentally. I'll aside here, this was a great example with Lydia. So Lydia, who owned the house before us, so mentioned in the last 5 years of her life, and she passed away. She had a good life, she's in her 90s, she had a good run. But in the last couple times I saw her, she didn't recognize me. Her memory was just gone. But what would be wild is her daughter would bring her over to the property, and we'd walk around this house, and it would jog these memories. She could go to a certain spot out in the yard or in the house and just it'd come back to her. She'd just start talking about something that happened there. And that was just very moving for me, because you realize that most of your life is spent in your house, and your memories are created there, and there is that sentimental attachment to this. So now I have that. I've got good and bad. I've got 8 years and these wonderful memories in this place, and to sell it to the developer and have it to be demolished, I've got this book about it, or to have someone that's going to gut it, that would not sit well with me. But there's also a point where you have to be practical. And then if you want to go the other way on that, is philosophically, on a long enough timeline, nothing lasts forever. These houses will last a long time, but if we go out 2,000 years, are these houses going to be around? I don't know. The oldest wooden framed houses in Tibet was built in the 7th century. They can last a long time. Is this house going to be around centuries from now? I don't know. So then I go, well, the longest timeline, why does it matter anyway? So I go back and forth and all that. But I kind of view it as, well, let's keep them around. I do think they add something to our communities. Let's keep them around as long as we can.
Sir?
Yeah.
I'm Bob Wood. I work at the National Aerospace Museum in Washington, D.C.
Oh.
And what you just said about talking to somebody that's aged and can't quite remember, we did that with Grover Loaning. He built the aircrafts in the 1920s.
Okay.
And we had him come up to a conference room, and we had questions we wanted to ask him. And he did exactly what you did about that lady, about talking about aircraft and the history of aircraft, but he couldn't remember it until we came up with a question.
Yeah.
And he talked for 5 minutes.
Yeah. But it's just amazing that weirdly the house becomes in a way an extension of you and your life. It's your own personal history, and the architecture has that impact. It's a wild thing. Yeah.
Have you done the genealogy of your house, meaning all the other people who
That have owned it?
Yeah.
So it stayed, they did a good, the families have been all that have owned it before. That's the other thing. I would feel guilty to sell it to developer because so many people before me have really had the same philosophy of let's keep this thing around and nobody touches it or changes it and it keeps going down. And I don't want it gets to me, I don't want to be the one to muck that up. So it stayed in the Loring family. The Lorings came over in 1630, I think, and it was owned by a Loring and a lot of these houses are this way. It stays in a family. Around the 20th century, it's like everything just goes haywire, and then suddenly it's got, 6 or 7 owners, over the next century. This is the case for that, but it's pretty well documented. We have a little debate on the year. Lydia believed it was 1702 based on records of Thomas Loring owning this property, but he owned 2 properties and it's possible it was built a little bit later. But I haven't gone that far into like dendrochronology. I don't get that crazy about it. Yeah.
Are you familiar with the Bryant houses over there in Plimpton?
That rings a bell.
Yeah.
Because Plimpton, did anyone run into Jenny and Mike Full Circle Homes? Do you know them?
Full Circle?
Yeah.
I watch it all the time.
Okay, I was very briefly on their first season on an episode of that.
Yeah, I watch them all the time.
Yeah.
Clips.
In the intro of the first season, there was some 17th century wood carving, paneling, so I did the wood carving for that. So Plimpton, I've been over there, I've gone to their little Mayflower Mercantile Fair and stuff, so I'm vaguely familiar.
Plimpton, probably about a month ago, and all of a sudden I saw this house that's sitting on these beams. They had moved it, a portion of the house.
Yeah.
That's one of the newest segments.
Yeah.
So I turned around, and of course I had to get out, get my camera, take pictures, and try to figure out where did this come from. And then I went to Full Circle, and there it was. They were moving it last fall.
Yeah.
I was waiting for the weather to get better, but they're preserving that house, which was from the Bradford family.
Yeah, okay.
And up that street, it was all Bradford school. But my ancestors are the Bryants, so that's Stephen Bryant and his son John.
Gotcha.
Of course, they had over 100 acres of land back then, but the
It's all
Lorings were big in
subdivided.
that. It's Plimpton.
Big
and,
name.
Pembroke.
Yeah, in Hingham, there's a Loring Theater. I think it's the same family. In Hull, they came in Hull. Yeah, there's a whole bunch of them. Yeah, I've so focused on kind of the building end of it. I've got, there's only so many interests you can have. But they're a good example. Jenny and Mike are a good example. If you watch that show, they're not recreating horsehair plaster and hewing beam. They're not that far in the preservation approach. But I advocate for what they do because some of those houses would be demolished if they don't come in and spruce them up. And they're good at, she comes in with the interior design perspective in sort of keeping the spirit of one of these houses alive.
Forging the light fixtures.
Yeah, so they'll.
On that, but they do have to, they bring it up to date a little bit.
Yeah, they're not. We've treated this thing like a house museum, and they're not doing that. But this old house is still there. I'm fine with that.
Like you said, they'd be both.
It'd be gone. So you gotta pick your battles. One more? Yeah. So.
I grew up in a house that was built in like 1790, but probably was older. The house had no ridge pole. It just had the 2 ramps.
Oh, to come together.
It came together and had the huge peg that went through them.
Yep.
I talked to other people, they'd never heard of it.
I've seen that before. Did it have? It did have So I don't know if you're familiar with the terminology. So the rafters are running vertically, and then you've got beams that run horizontally.
It was just a small attic that went like this.
Okay.
And they came up like this, and then they went down to the floor.
So I've seen them. So you see different sometimes you have big beefy rafters real close together, sometimes the rafters are really far apart, but typically there's a long beam running horizontally that connects the two. And I've seen it sometimes where there won't be a ridge beam, but there'll be purlins on the side and they just don't have a beam on the top, which structurally it's fine.
Very different to see.
Yeah.
Used to hang all the clothes on.
There's all kinds of, you get into this too when you get that far into the weeds, you see all sorts of weird variations of how they built these things. Yeah. All right, and we'll wrap it up. How about this? I'll stick around for a little bit. Give me the hook here. I'll stick around if anyone has any other questions. And also if anyone wants to buy a book, $25. I do cash or check. I don't have Venmo. I'm a younger guy, but I'm still a dinosaur with technology because I like old technology, so I don't do Venmo. If you want to buy and don't have cash or check, it's Amazon or, as they say, wherever books are sold. We're on all the major book platforms. So. Thank you.